Hello everyone, and welcome once again to Caleb Likes Books. Today I have another video for you, a ranking video, but instead of ranking, specific series or books in series or things like that, I'm going to be talking about some books that I am excited to read that are currently on my TBR, specifically series that I have not yet completed, but ranking them by how excited I am to continue and finish them. So for this, I have selected 10 book series that I have started but have not yet finished. These can be series that are still ongoing. It can be series that are completed. In fact, I think most of these are completed series. There's a little bit of ongoing, but mostly completed series, and ranking them by which ones I'm most excited to finish. And so all of these are books that I have read parts of the series, or series that I have read part of, but they're ones that I still have not finished yet. I might have only read one book, I might have read a few, it kind of depends on the series. But yeah, so without further ado, at number 10, I have one that is one that I actually kind of recently decided that I'm going to continue, and that is Dune by Frank Herbert. This is a 6-book series, I believe, 6 or 7 book series. And I recently reread the first book, Dune, and this was partially, first of all, to refresh my memory because I didn't really remember it that well, but also because I had been considering continuing the series but not sure if I really wanted to, and having now reread it, I think that I probably do want to continue the series, at least some. I've heard that the series can get a little bit out there as it goes along, so I may only want to read the first handful of books, but I would like to at least continue the series and see what it is all about. Plus, it's a highly influential sci-fi series, and so I think that also, I want to read the stuff that was very influential, the stuff that's very popular, just to see what all the talk is about. Plus, Dune, just based on the first book, which is all I've experienced of Dune up to this point, is just a world that I think is really interesting, and I've heard from some people that across the Dune series, the main characters change and the things about the story change, but the planet of Arrakis from, the Dune books is more or less the main character of the series. And considering that the world building of the first Dune book is one of, if not the strongest aspect in my mind, that really excites me also. So I'm really looking forward to hopefully continuing this series someday. It's not a massive priority, hence why it's down at number 10, but it's one that I would like to continue. At number 9, I have arguably one of the most influential fantasy series, now that we've talked about arguably one of the most influential sci-fi series, and that is The Wheel of Time. I have read the first 3 Wheel of Time books, and I read about half of the 4th book, The Shadow Rising, before I DNF'd it. This series is a little difficult for me to figure out why it didn't quite work for me to the point that I wanted to DNF book 4. I think for me it's just some of the characters don't quite land with me, and I find just the amount of characters and things going on a little confusing. But this is a series that I really do want to continue because, again, kind of similar to Dune, I love the world building of this series. I really enjoy some of the plot elements. I love the writing style, all kinds of things. There's a lot of things about this series that I really enjoy. And again, very influential, very popular, very beloved by fantasy fans. So this is one that I do want to continue reading and eventually finish. Yeah, it's just one of those series that I just hear a lot about, and I kind of feel bad that I'm not as invested in finishing it as I feel like I should be, which again, part of the reason why it's lower on the list. But this is one that I still want to finish up and hopefully enjoy. Number 8 is going to be the Bloodsworn Saga by John Gwynne. This is a trilogy that's actually going to be finishing up this year. I have read the first book of this trilogy, and this is one that I am excited to read because I really loved the first book. It was one of my favorite books that I read last year, and it's like a Nordic-inspired fantasy, which is something I think is really cool. And it's just one of those series where I've heard a lot of things about, obviously book 1 because I've read it, but also, heard things about that, and then heard things about book 2, and people love both of those books. And considering how much I loved book 1, I fully expect to also enjoy book 2 and 3. The first book was just one of those books that I just had such a good time reading. I just thought it was wonderful and just so much fun to read. And it's just a series that I really want to continue. And hopefully I will be able to get my hands on the second book and read it by the time the third one comes out later this year. But this is just one that I'm really interested in, and it has a lot of ideas in it that I think are really cool. At number 7, I have one that I'm actually currently in the process, actively in the process of reading, and that is The Elder Empire by Will White. This is one that I have read currently the first couple of books in, but I'm very excited to continue it. And it's a 6-book series made up of 2 trilogies that take place at the same time and cross over at multiple points, which I think is really cool. And this is, again, one of those series where the world building has really stuck out to me. And even some elements of the plot and the characters. The first book I thought was really good, but the plot and the characters didn't quite connect with me, whereas in the second book that I read, which the first book was the first Sea book, and the second book that I read was the first Shadow book. And the first Shadow book really connected with me in terms of plot, in terms of world building, in terms of characters, just all across the board. I really enjoyed it, even more than the first one that I read. But this is one that I just have so many questions about, I guess, is the way that I'm going to put it. Like, the way the world building is, where it even, to me, as a big fan of H.P. Lovecraft and Lovecraftian horror, has a bit of that sort of feel to it in some ways. And I just cannot wait to see how that plays in later in the series, and how and learn more about that stuff. I just think it sounds super interesting, and it's something that I really want to just find out more about. And plus, with me really loving both of these books, but especially the first Shadow book, I think this is a series that, if it keeps up that momentum, will really work for me. So I'm very excited to continue it. Then at number 6, we have a series that I have been in the middle of for a very long time, but still have not continued. More so not for lack of a desire, but a lack of ability for a long time. And that is The Witcher by Andrzej Sapkowski. I don't know how to say his name, unfortunately. I hope I got it somewhat correct. This is a series where I've read 5 books out of the 8 that are out, although I believe he's working on another one. But this is an interesting one because it's a 5-book main series with 2 short story collections that most people recommend you read first, which I did, and then a standalone that most people recommend you read after the main series. So it's kind of 2 short story collections and a 5-book series, and then a standalone. And currently I have read the 2 short story collections and the first 3 books of the main series. And this is one that is kind of twofold reasons why I haven't continued it in a while. The most major of which is that I could not get my hands on the rest of the books for a long time, which was especially made difficult because I own the trade paperbacks with the art from the video games on the cover, which I would say for a long time was like the most common way to get these books. And then recently, like a year or 2 ago, Orbit released new paperbacks with new art and everything. I am one of those people who likes to keep my editions consistent, and because there was these new editions out, the old editions were no longer available in most places that I could find. So it took me quite a while to be able to track down old copies of the edition that I had from the bookstores that I go to. So thankfully I was able to do that last year. And so now I can finally continue this series, but also this is one where the main series doesn't quite work for me on the same level as the short stories did. I read the first 3 books, and each one I liked a little better than the last, so hopefully that's a good sign. But this is one that I also want to continue because it was one of the first fantasy series I started. When I started getting into fantasy, it was like Song of Ice and Fire. I mean, Lord of the Rings was the first one as far as adult fantasy. And then A Song of Ice and Fire and The Witcher were like the first things I started with. And so this is one that also has been a long time coming for one that I've been wanting to finish. So a lot of reasons why I want to get through this one. At number 5, I have Malazan, Book of the Fallen by Stephen Erickson, as well as the wider works of the Malazan world, but specifically Book of the Fallen. This may feel weird because I just said a few minutes ago about the Wheel of Time that I found it very confusing with all the characters and the plot and all the things that are going on. And Malazan is very much known for that to a much higher degree. But I really enjoyed the first book, Gardens of the Moon. Currently have the second book ready to go sometime. But the main reason why I want to read this series is for several reasons. First of all, it just has a lot of things about it that I find interesting, especially that I read in the first book. And I've seen like even artwork and heard different things about the world and the series and things that I just think are super interesting. But the big thing that makes me want to finish this series more than pretty much anything else is that the people who read the series and enjoyed it, it seems like it's one of their favorite series. Like it seems like this series is either you don't really like it or you absolutely love it. And I want to have that positive experience with this series. And it seems like one of those series that could kind of almost go either way for me. I did really enjoy the first book, but I did still find it very confusing and very dense and a little difficult to read. And so I'm hoping that I don't get put off by that too much with the future books. But it seems like one of those series that really could go either way for me. I might end up loving it, or I might just end up getting too confused and put it down. There's really no telling, I think. But I really do hope I love this series because, again, I want to have that level of an amazing experience with this series that so many of its fans have. At number 4, I have the Star Wars The High Republic series. This is a series that is near and dear to my heart. It is the series that got me back into a reading as an adult. And so I'm really interested in continuing it. I've been stuck in the middle of phase 2 for a little while. I haven't been able to get caught up on this series for a bit. And I think part of the reason for that is I don't find phase 2 as compelling as phase 1 and by extension phase 3. Because for those of you who don't know, phase 1 and 3 are the same kind of story following the same characters, and phase 2 is a prequel. So I am not as drawn into phase 2, so I'm right in the middle of that right now. So I'm just kind of like, I don't know if I feel like continuing it just yet, just because I'm not quite invested enough into it. But it is one that I do intend to continue. I have the next book ready to go, so this is one that I do really look forward to continuing, especially so I can get to phase 3, back to all my favorite characters from phase 1 and all that stuff. And it's one of those series that, again, has a lot of ideas that I find really interesting, a lot of stuff that's very unique for Star Wars. And I love these big book series set in the Star Wars universe. You're going to be seeing one more of those later. But I love these big series that with big storylines and so many interesting characters and all that stuff. Whereas this is also, for me, a little more approachable than something like Molin or Wheel of Time also. But yeah, I just really like this series and I want to continue it, just haven't gotten around to it. So I'm very much looking forward to doing so. Number 3 is going to be Discworld by Terry Pratchett. I have read 4 books in Discworld so far out of the 40 or so that currently exist. And so I have a long ways to go before I finish this one. But Discworld is one of those series that I always just have a lot of fun reading. Out of the 4 books I read, each one has been at least entertaining. The weakest one that I've read so far, which for me would be The Color of Magic, was still very entertaining. And then you get into others that I read, like Mort and Small Gods and Reaper Man, and especially in the case for Small Gods and Reaper Man, I would say, that have very interesting themes and also really impactful character moments, really emotional moments for me. So it's one of those series that I can see as I get more into it and discovering the stories in it that really work for me, because it's 40 books, so I'm sure that not every book will completely knock it out of the park for me, but finding the ones like Reaper Man, which is my favorite of the 4, that really emotionally resonate with me and even then also make me laugh a lot. It's just one of those series that I can see really working for me in a lot of different ways. And it's just so much fun to read. I always have a great time with these books. And so, having 40 of them to go through, as daunting as a number as that may be, knowing that I'm probably going to be very entertained throughout most of those, if not all of them, it makes it much more exciting for me, because I'm like, I have so many more that I can read, and I fully expect to enjoy all of them to some degree. So that is also why I'm really looking forward to this one. At number 2, I have a Brandon Sanderson series, the only one so far that I am not caught up on or finished, and that is the Wax and Wayne series, otherwise known as Mistborn Era 2. I have read the first 3 books out of this series, so I only have the 4th book left to go, and this is one where, I could read it now, obviously, but the main reason why I am putting it off is because I'm waiting for it to come out in mass market paperback, which the last I heard is supposed to be in this October. And so as soon as that comes out, I'm going to try my best to get my hands on it and read it, because I really enjoy Sanderson in general. He's my favorite author, so obviously, you know, an unfinished or a series that I have not yet caught up on is going to end up very highly on this list. And I have really enjoyed the Wax and Wayne series so far. The second book, Shadows of Self, is one of my favorite Cosmere books. I really enjoyed Alloy of Law and Bands of Mourning, even though they are probably lower in the Cosmere for me, but I still really enjoyed them. And I've heard a lot of great things about the Lost Metal, and I've heard that it's very Cosmere inclusive and all kinds of things. So there's a lot of things about that book that I'm very excited to read. And also just the fact that it is one of only currently 2 Cosmere books that I have to read before I'm caught up. Just also adds to that excitement for me. So very much looking forward to reading this one as well. And that brings us to number 1, which if you've been following the channel, you probably knew that this was going to be on here because I talk about it frequently, because there's 19 books of it and I've reviewed most of those on this channel. And that is the Star Wars The New Jedi Order series. Currently, at time of recording this, I have 5 books left in the series to go. Out of the 19, and I intend to finish this series by early summer, probably sometime in June if I were to guess. So I am really looking forward to finishing this series. It's been such a fun ride so far. So many of these books have become among my favorite Star Wars books, and not only that, but some of my favorite books of all time, like Traitor and Star by Star, Destiny's Way, the Edge of Victory duology. There's so many great books in this series, and I've heard that it ends amazingly, and it, you know, some of the next few books I've heard are a little bit more hit or miss for some people, but some people that I very much trust, some of my friends have said they really enjoyed those books, so I hope I really enjoy them too. And it'll just be nice to get this series done with, because first of all, it's been such a long time coming. You know, it's 19 books. It's taken me a while. But also because it then will lead me into continuing the Star Wars Expanded Universe storyline. Because even though I know a few spoilers here and there about future books, I want to read the majority of New Jedi Order onwards in chronological order, so that I don't get too spoiled on the things that I don't know about yet. So I'm looking forward to continuing this series, because then I'm one step closer to being at that point also, and continuing into the Darkness trilogy and the Legacy of the Force and Fate of the Jedi and the various standalones and things like that. So lots of reasons I'm excited for this one. But yeah, I've been really enjoying this series so far, and so it ends up at my number 1. So that's pretty much it for this video. Let me know in the comments if you have read any of these series and what you thought of them, or if you're currently in the process of reading them, and if your excitement level maybe matches mine, or if there's any of these you're interested in reading, any of that kind of stuff. And also, if there are any series that you are currently in the process of reading and are very excited about that I did not mention in my list, let me know about those in the comments as well. I'm curious to hear all your thoughts. So that's pretty much it for this video. So thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next time.